All right. Good morning, Geauga County, northeastern Ohio, Lake County. Wake up, Lake County. Get your coffee. Are listening to the voice of Geauga, where every Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 8 a.m., you'll be informed, entertained, and enlightened. And this morning we have with us Mr. Jeff Skinner, author, great guy, and activist. We've got Jonathan Broadbent. I'm not sure what Jonathan
Good
Broadbent
morning, all.
is, other than the co-host for this program. And we had a very rowdy discussion prior to the show starting, which we'll have a show about at some point in time. Jonathan and I are going to continue our debate and discussion about Central Committee in the state of Ohio. But with that said, that's not the topic for today. We're not going to go there. But I do want to talk about, because we kind of mess up and don't talk about our sponsors often enough, or as often as we should. One of our sponsors is Red EFT Arborist, and I've got to upload. I actually downloaded their spot last night, and I'm going to be uploading. It's very entertaining. It talks about all the great things they do about cutting down trees, taking care of shrubs, and all that kind of stuff. If you want to reach out, if you got a tree problem, the limbs are falling off, the tree's going to fall over, looks like it's leaning towards your house, you just question the health of your tree. Red Arborist is an arborist. He's not just a tree guy, and he'll come out and diagnose your situation and help you understand what the right thing to do is. And you can reach him at 440-850-4968. And I'm seeing his trucks all over the place. He was just in my neighborhood. Andrew was just in my neighborhood the other day. I had a nice conversation with him. He's a real nice guy, on top of being a great arborist. We also have the VFW, Veterans for Foreign Wars, out of Chardon, Middlefield, and the American Legion out of Middlefield and Chardon. And so those are our sponsors. And if you want to be a sponsor of this program, reach out to us at voiceofjog@gmail.com. We'd love to have you. It's cheap to be a sponsor in this program, but it really helps us with the show to stay on the air and to do all the good things that we do. I had a call last night from Ashtabula, actually Rock Creek, Ohio. And the guy there streams our program because the radio doesn't reach that far. By the way, you listen to this radio program on 101.5 FM or 1330 AM. But he's streaming our program all the way from Rock Creek. And he had to call and tell us how much he likes our program. So shout out to the guy over in Rock Creek, Ohio. Thanks for listening to us. We have people listening to us all across northeastern Ohio. Even those people who don't like our program, Jonathan, listen to our program. Don't you find that?
What? There are
Don't you
people
find
that
that
don't like our
amazing?
program?
And if you don't like our program and you want to complain about something we've said, or you just want to engage us, we have fun with that. So call us at 440-946-9468. We're open to anybody. We'll talk to anybody and debate and discuss topics across the board, a lot of different things. We're going to be, John Morrow, wake up this morning. We're going to be talking about data centers. So get your phone ready. I know that you're going to want to engage in this conversation. So we're going to begin the conversation today talking about data centers, and it's a hot topic in northeastern Ohio and in all of Ohio. Um, Data centers probably are going to be reality. What's that going to mean to us? What's the impact to us? Some people consider it scary. Some people say it's just the way of the future. What's the reality? Jeff has done a lot of homework on that, and he's going to educate us. So, with that said, I'm flipping it over to you, Jonathan. You can weigh in and introduce Mr. Jeff Skinner.
Yeah, so there's a lot that I can add, I believe, to the conversation about data centers, but I think that will pepper into the conversation. So why don't we just kick things off with Jeff? Jeff, what's the latest on data centers in Ohio?
Well, if you've been paying attention to your social media newsfeed, they're everywhere and they are encroaching very fast. Residents in Lake County, I think, have been fighting this battle, specifically in most recently the area of Perry Village. So if you're in that general area or close to it, you know of what's going on there and the massive data center that's going into the Champion Farms territory there. But Geauga has been specifically lucky, in my opinion, thus far. But they're closing in. They're in Portage. They're in Lake. They're all around us, and they're closing in fast. So
We,
that's the current state of the
we
game.
actually have data centers in Perry. Is there a data center here?
One is coming. Yeah. So
But
it's been in talks for a little bit. The village has gone to a great extent to try to facilitate a deal on the Champion Farms property, which is jointly owned between the township and the village. Part of it used to also belong to the school board, the school district there as well, but they have since bequeathed it to the residential areas. But they have sold the territory, but they're waiting on some due diligence, is my understanding, to actually begin construction. And the public is outraged because that entire deal has, in their opinion, and in many other people's opinion, been under the table
so
for a
what's
large
wrong with
part.
data centers? Just a big box building that contains a lot of computers. Tell us what's wrong with a data center.
Yeah, what's wrong with it, in my opinion, is multifaceted. One of them comes down to the usage of data centers, right? So who is using it? What are they storing there? And what is it going to tie into? Obviously, there's a lot of discussion about whether data centers are going to be used to just keep and catalog AI pictures of cats, which I don't think is why all this is happening, or whether it's going to be used for a larger infrastructure. And I think that's the more realistic model. When we have military companies like Palantir or Anduril moving into the state, most likely these data centers are going to be used for things like next generation 911 call centers, cataloging face recognition technology, flock camera information, surveillance technology, in short. And eventually, the goal, when you talk to all of these CEOs of these large corporations, it's social credit, it's digital identification systems. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that will go into these data centers. It's long-term storage of that sort of information that was started way back during the Bush administration with the Information Awareness Project, which was pushed forth by the DARPA organization in early
So
2000s.
it's not
So
really
that
the
was the
it's
start.
not really the data center per se. It's what they do with the data center. There are issues with data centers because data centers consume a lot of electricity. They
Mhm.
require cooling for their computer systems, and so there's some issues with the infrastructure itself.
I think it was
But
headed there,
Right.
Skip.
so
I think it was headed there, but the
Yeah.
first stop, I think, is what is the data that's being stored
mhm.
and are there potential misuse and misapplication, abusive elements to the data itself. And then I think we can get into the environmental impact, electricity, and those kinds of things.
Yeah,
Right,
I thought
John?
it was important to separate the difference between what the actual harm done. The flock cameras in and of themselves don't create harm. What they do with the data that comes out of the flock
I,
cameras is harm. But I wanted to separate the two. So there's the infrastructure part. There's some harm associated with that, and then there's the actual what it enables. There's harm with that, and so separate those two and talk about those.
Yeah, so Jonathan, you're on point with the environmental factors and the infrastructure and the problems those can cause. But to skip your point, that is correct, right? So these are tools in the right hands. Potentially they could have benefit. The question is whether or not we trust the hands that are going to be wielding this sort of power. We've seen it get abused before. So it's a very alarming and concerning thing, I think, for every American, specifically Ohioans, for us, because this is in our backyards. Whether we believe this technology is going to be used for good and for our benefit. You're right. Flock cameras on their face, they're sold on the premise of they're going to be tracking license plates for criminals crossing county lines, that sort of stuff.
Right.
But they're not just being aimed at roads. There are instances of flock cameras being aimed at parks, recreational areas. So these are going to be used for much more than that. And they have the capacity to be used for much more than that. Many of them have sound recognition technology on top of video surveillance. So they can recognize and triangulate the position of footsteps or gunfire or speech in any general area that they're put into. So these are large scale surveillance infrastructure pieces that I don't think, in my opinion, the public is really aware of how it's all going to be pieced together unless you've been following things like the World Economic Forum and the Great Reset agendas, and you kind of see where the technocratic plans are marching us into.
Yeah, there's a great comment to that effect in the Rumble chat. So it's the nefarious uses of the data and the use of physical resources. And I think that's spot on. Those are two key elements to look at because you think about the beauty of Geauga County, all the natural resources we have, and free flowing clear waters, etc., fish and wildlife, the moderately well, moderately inexpensive power that we have access to, and all of that could go away very quickly with the inclusion of a major data center in Geauga County.
When you fear government,
Okay.
you have tyranny. When government fears the people, you have liberty. And we were just talking about
Great quote.
another program we're going to have coming up is our legislature is really useless. If you look at what they're working on down at the state of Ohio, it's a lot of recognition of people naming roads. Are they doing things like fixing the property tax problem? No. Are they doing other things to lower our taxes? No. And so there's a possibility that we could start leading an effort as citizens to change our law and forget the legislature, just take them off the table. But this data center thing comes right back down. Who's using? Do we trust the people who are putting all these things in places and how they're going to use the data? Look at what China is doing with the social credit system. That is abusive and pure tyranny, and
Yeah.
that's where it could go. And that's pretty scary, Jeff. I mean, I'll tell you what.
And Skip, just to piggyback on that, look at the number and the growing number of American politicians that have come out on record saying that they admire what's being done in China. We're coming up on a break. Remember, you can join us on YouTube, Rumble, and Facebook. You can call in and join the conversation at any time at 440-946-9468. We're going to come back with Jeff Skinner and more on the other side of the break.
All right. Mics are off. Mics are off.
That's my
All right.
that's my Trump dance.
There you go.
Uh-oh, we lost
nice
Jeff.
Yep. Well, good thing it's during the break. we'll
Hopefully.
work on getting Jeff back on again. We've got a question here, Gardens of CH. What is the lifespan of data centers? Will they need replaced or expanded? It appears they buy up a lot of acreage. That's another good point. The land itself. So we'll work on getting Jeff back on again. Stand by here, ladies and gentlemen. If you're hearing us now, it means that you're listening to our podcast. This is Skip Claypool, Jonathan Broadbent, and we are on a radio show break. So this, just in case you're a new listener, just tuning in for the first time, Voice of Geauga is a radio program that broadcasts in Northeast Ohio on WINT Radio, 101.5 FM, 1330 AM. Connected to that, because we use technology to do the radio show broadcast, we keep going during the break. So right now you're getting a little behind the curtains break, a glimpse into what happens during the break. So I will text Jeff Skinner and we'll work on getting him back on the show.
So when we come
30
back from
seconds, 30 seconds.
we come back from the break, I'm going to read a one of the comments on. Well, this is actually on Rumble. I thought it was going to be coming through Facebook. They're talking about putting our land records. Here's Jeff coming back. Putting our land records on the internet, and that's being required by our useless
10
state
seconds,
legislature.
10 seconds.
Welcome back to Voice of Geauga with Skip Claypool, myself, Jonathan Broadbent, and our guest, our returning guest, Jeff Skinner. Jeff Skinner writes for the Ohio Register. You'll find the Ohio Register on social media. You'll find Substack. It is actually a website. It is theohioregister.com, right, Jeff?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah, theohioregister.com. Periodically, you'll see me, Jonathan Broadbent, capture something and I'll share it out. It comes from the Ohio Register. That's Jeff Skinner. He's the man behind that journalism. So one thing, and I know there's a lot that we need to cover to understand these data centers and the implications of them. including land use. They're gobbling up massive acreage. And there was actually a discussion a few weeks ago between Skip and I. Um, I made the comment on air that there was a data center proposed. I want to say it was in Texas that that plans to consume over 7,000 acres. Well, you could double check that, and it's true. It's a little over 7,000 acres going into the data center. So these things aren't small. They're not like a factory building or something. They're huge, and they get into all kinds of massive power. They need a tremendous amount of water. And one piece that's a key, critical piece to me that I'd like to make sure we cover today, and that is the implications to what's called CBDC, or centralized banking digital currency. There are some people that are advocating for using that digital currency to replace the American dollar. So take your pick, Jeff, where you want to dive back into the conversation.
Well, let's go to the environmental. You mentioned water, and I want to touch on that because we did, you know, touch on it a little bit or talk about it before the break. So, one of the things that I think people have been having a hard time kind of grasping is what the environmental impacts are of data centers, because there is a lot of misinformation out there, in my opinion, and it's pushed by data center developers. And one of the things I think is important to look at is water supply, specifically safe drinking water. So a lot of these data centers, what I see is that they're going into rural territories, but they're also going into municipal territories. Down in central Ohio, Springfield specifically has multiple data centers going into their city territory. And each one of these data centers, they advertise themselves as closed loop water systems. So they're saying that they're bringing water in, and the public facing commentary as well, the water just stays in a closed loop and it cools the internal computer systems of these servers. That is not entirely accurate. That goes for a temporary time period, right? The water has to be flushed out, and then it becomes wastewater, and it is contaminated with all kinds of fun, uh, we'll say, wastewater solvents, cleaning compounds, and PFAS, specifically these forever chemicals. PFAS is a category of like 15,000 different compounds that are linked to everything from, thyroid disease, hormone disruption, endocrine disruptions, and weakening immune systems. And this wastewater has to go somewhere. And the real risk factor that I don't feel that these municipalities, when they bring these data centers in, are looking at is how that wastewater getting dumped into either the Great Lakes, which the Ohio EPA is currently mulling over a petition to allow, or dumping it directly into the city municipal water supply, right down the drain where everybody else's water goes. And that water goes, if you live in a closed loop municipal system, it goes into the sewer system, it gets siphoned through a water treatment facility, and then back into your tap water. And the problem is that the federal EPA just rolled back significant regulations on PFAS exposure in humans. So they're saying now the safe limit for exposure in humans is greater than what it was before. Now, I don't know about any of you or your listeners, but I don't feel that my body has somehow developed a greater propensity to tolerate PFAS exposure. But what I do see is that there's a greater push to allow PFAS wastewater be dumped into drinking water supplies. So that's one of the big risk factors I see. It's not just sucking up the water, which, yeah, if you live in a municipal area, you're concerned about water bill. It's also about what water you're giving your kids. If you make baby formula at home, what are you giving, mixing with that formula to provide to your infants and toddlers? Like, this is a significant health concern that cities are not looking at all, from what I can see.
I want to pause right there because we get caught up, understandably, in a lot of discussion around wastewater and its implications to human health. But what about everything else that uses water? All the fish and wildlife and game and you name it, everything uses water. And when you get bugs landing on, carrying things around, water bugs, mole badgers, beavers, they're going to be picking this stuff up if it gets put into wastewater, and they're going to be carrying it back into nature, into wildlife. The implications of that are staggering to me. And I'm pausing to interject that because I don't want to spend all of our time only looking at the implications to human health. Have you heard anybody looking into that and talking about the implications to wildlife?
Well, no one talks about it. Typically, the conversations that I've seen in village council meetings or city council meetings, it comes down to, well, the constant noise and the disruption to birds and wildlife around the data center. But those typically get shooed away as sort of the tree hugger commentary, right? It's like, well, who cares about those hippy dippy types? But you have a great point there, which is people who have historically been conservative, have been more interested in conserving the land because of game, because they appreciate that lifestyle of hunting, trapping, fishing, and that is negatively impacted by data centers by those very factors. I mean, if you have this constant disruption of sound, noise, hum, that disrupts the bird life, that disrupts any wastewater pumping is going to damage fisheries. Anywhere you're going to try to fish is going to be, I mean, I would not personally catch or eat a fish that is living, eating, breathing in water that has been dumped in by these data centers. I think that the potential for health hazards is too great at that point.
Yeah, years ago we dumped a bunch of PCBs into Lake Erie, and as a result, you have to limit what you eat in terms of salmon and walleye and that kind of stuff. And the EPA's now that's settled into the mud, and unless you stir that up, but it has created problems. One big question that I have is, and I used to work for electronic data systems, huge data centers at that time. They're little tiny dots on the map compared to the data centers they're talking about today. And so I understand what a data center is. I used to work in one and supported them and so on and so forth. But why are they building them in all these cities? I mean, you could put a data center, it doesn't make any difference where it's located. You could throw it in the desert someplace where it has minimal impact outside of it needs some sort of coolant to keep the computers cooled. But I don't really understand why they feel it necessary to plop these huge buildings into, fertile farmland. I don't understand that. Do you have any comment on that?
I do, and I think that that comes into the origin of why Ohio has become the hotspot for data centers in the country, really. The argument thus far has been, well, Ohio is centrally located because we have all of this open territory farmland that is not currently utilized, and we have great, water supplies. But I think that's only part of the story. I think the larger aspect of why Ohio has been targeted has been a specific business model that was developed in New Albany, Ohio, by the New Albany Group that entailed massive tax abatements and the funneling and siphoning of government dollars into private equity and private partnerships that led to the attraction of data center corporations. That really is the linchpin of why Ohio has been targeted.
Yeah, public-private partnerships are are evil, in my estimation. And yet everybody touts them as though, well, these things are fantastic, and you make a deal between business. That's if anybody knows history, go back to Italy. That is fascism. That is where fascism comes from. When you get big government together with big companies, and they start then setting the rules on how we what we play by. And by the way, just for the public's knowledge, Mr. Jeff Skinner here is one of our citizen authors for the Voice of Geauga newspaper, and he writes some
Mm-hmm.
really good articles. We'd love to get some more people like Jeff writing for the paper. So if you have any interest in writing for the Voice of Geauga, please reach out to us because we could use more people like Jeff. He's stretched thin. He's doing so many things. So, and
He is.
he's a great
He is.
guy. So, but back on this data center for a second. I've been trying to keep an open mind on this discussion, but the more I'm hearing about the impacts of these data centers, knowing that we can mitigate this. If the legislatures really want data centers, then we can find a way to do it that doesn't have a major impact on our farmland. I mean, we certainly should be fighting one in Geauga County. We're a little tiny county with fertile farmland, and we certainly don't want it sucked up with a big block building sitting there. By the way, blocking the sun so it can't get to the grass, can't get to the trees, all that kind of stuff. And so I'm not a tree hugger, but maybe I am. I don't know. But these
Maybe
are
I
these are
am
bad
too.
things. These are bad things.
Yeah. And I think at the end of the day, we're all a little bit of a tree hugger, right? Because we appreciate the land not just as a talking point, but as people who live in it, amongst it, and enjoy recreational activity in it. But I do want to just jump back into that public-private partnership commentary that you had, Skip, because I think you're 100% right. And the origins of that concept here in Ohio specifically tie into what many consider the most evil aspect of Ohio politics, namely the one potentially guiding a lot of this, Mr. Leslie Wexner, down in New Albany, and his New Albany group that was started between him and a guy named, I believe it was Jack Kessler, um, led to the creation of multiple other subsidiaries building into Jobs, Ohio. So you had the New Albany group first, and they developed this concept of the public-private partnership using the leverages of commerce to guide legislation in the Columbus area, effectively
Jeff, I
creating.
need to step in there. I'm glad you got to Jobs Ohio. I want to pick up this conversation, but we have a break coming
Oh,
up.
yeah.
Remember, join the conversation at 440-946-9468 or find us on social media and join the chat. We'll see you on the other side of the break.
Mics are off. Mics are off.
While we're in the break, to our listening audience on Facebook, YouTube, and Rumble, we could use your help. We need more sponsors on the radio to keep the radio program going and the newspaper. We need advertisers in the newspaper. That's how we fund getting the newspaper to every home and every business in Geauga County. And we could use some more citizen journalists to add some balance to the paper. Right now, we're in a political season. People are going to criticize us, but criticize the Maple Leaf too. Look at their stories and so forth in this season that we're in.
Yeah, it's
But
election cycle.
we need people who are out there. They're attending meetings. They're seeing things going on in their community, going to school events, that kind of stuff. Write some stories about it and put it in the Voice of Geauga. Help us to keep the Voice of Geauga a newspaper that's got balanced stories and stuff in it, and keep it alive and going. People are reading it and enjoying it, and I know that because I get a lot of phone calls and comments when I'm running around talking to people. So we need your help, though.
And it's a tremendous opportunity.
We're not hiring staffs of people like the Maple Leaf or Sugar Valley Times. We depend on people who are willing to write a story and submit it, like Jeff is, and some others. We have other people submitting some articles. And one of the articles coming out in this upcoming paper is about dark money coming into Geauga County, distorting our politics. It's been happening for a while. We've never talked about it. Our papers won't talk about it. Our Maple Leaf and Sugar Valley Times won't even go near it. But we're going to talk about it. We're going to put an article in the paper and discuss the disgusting, cowardly activity of the folks that are putting out these mailers and hiding behind a nonprofit corporation to be able to do that. And so if you're listening and you may be listening to this program and you're engaged in that, you might want to be a whistleblower and help us too, because we're starting to track all the players down, and in the not too distant future we'll be doing a reveal. So
you've given a nice little teaser there for the upcoming Voice of Geauga newspaper.
You got it.
There are going to be some exciting articles, and we're very thankful to have Jeff Skinner being among those authoring articles for the paper. It's greatly appreciated, Jeff.
Yeah, I've got 2 coming your way, actually, Skip. So be on the lookout.
I'm excited about that. You do a great job. I mean, I always enjoy your articles. You're a very good writer, and I don't know how you find the time to do all the stuff you're doing with the Ohio Register and all that other stuff, but
very little sleep.
But we have all these other people. We got a bunch of people. I'm seeing we've got good numbers today on Rumble and on Facebook and on YouTube. There's a lot of people out there who can write. I don't know what what are you going to do with your day if you don't write an article? It'll take you what, half an hour to sit down, or maybe an hour to write an article, ship it to us. You could have ChatGPT write it. Just throw the idea into ChatGPT; it'll write it for you.
I don't think I like that idea.
What I will throw in is, on that point, is the Ohio Register. One of the spearheads that we've tried to do is train people on how to write AP style articles. So if you are out there and you're kind of, unsure about how to do it, how to format it, we help you, specifically I help you. That's one of the pilot programs I've tried to do to encourage people to be citizen journalists in their own backyard, because we want to, on the
30
tour front,
seconds. 30 seconds.
encourage people to report on what's happening that the mainstream news is not talking about. So
Yeah, beautiful. That certainly can't hurt. Let's get as many people
10
as
seconds.
possible.
10 seconds.
Look at Facebook. It's a
Welcome back to Voice of Geauga with Skip Claypool, Jonathan Broadbent, myself, and we have Jeff Skinner returning. We're talking today about data centers and their implications. They're wide ranging, and some of it, as I'm reading through the Rumble chat, some of it has some very nefarious implications. And Jeff was just beginning to dive into some of the underpinnings of why it seems, as we look around, that Ohio, not exclusively, but very significantly, seems to be a target of expanding and building data centers. So let's pick up where we left off. You were talking about the New Albany group in Central Ohio.
Hey, let me add to that because there's you're not watching the Facebook chat. I'm seeing all the chats from all the channels. And there was a comment down here that Vivek Ramaswamy, Jay Edwards, and Christina Rogner in Pike County today with groundbreaking of possibly the largest data center in the world in Pike County. And so, and that cabal, I mean, I'm not. I know what Ramaswamy and Rogner and those guys are thinking. They're thinking that they're on the part of this leading edge technology that's going to create jobs. What is it that they sell these things on? Jobs, right? And
Oh yeah, and there are hardly any
and
jobs.
all that,
It's a
and
small
that's
handful.
right. And
And
so
then they get tax abatement. These mega corporations, so they can shave a few pennies off of their bottom line and add more to their profits. They claim that these are job sites that people are going to be hired outside of the initial construction, and then very few people actually employed to work there. There's the jobs are negligible.
it's kind of a
Right,
lights
Jeff?
out operation. I'm sorry for interrupting again, but I wanted to read that comment because we've got as we're talking about this, this is moving forward. And what do people do? I mean, we've got this cabal out there that are pushing this for whatever the reasons are, and some of us think nefarious reasons. Jeff, what can we do?
well, wow, lot to touch on
Should we go
there.
chain ourselves to a tree, or what is it that the when the left wingers do? They go throw paint on the side of the building or something.
Yeah,
What do we
yeah.
do?
I don't think we're there just yet, but I would say focus on primaries is that's my current strategy. Is primary elections are incredibly important right now, and most people don't understand what they are, what's going on with them, who's in it. But you mentioned Ramaswamy and Brogner, and I do want to touch on that because that is connected to this. But Jonathan, to what you said, the New Albany group. So what we touched on before the break is the public-private partnership concept with the New Albany group that they developed to leverage commerce as a way to manipulate and coerce legislation. And they were successful in that by basically forcing legislation to the point where New Albany had become an autonomous, privatized area. They have very little accountability out there. And that model was largely used to create the Columbus Partnership in 2002, which funneled into Jobs Ohio. And Jobs Ohio is probably the crown jewel of this entire public private partnership corruption scandal, in my opinion. Because what they did is they took control of the state liquor tax, which is around $1.4 billion annually. And in my opinion, it could be even larger than that. But they're funneling all this money in there with no oversight and no discretion from the public. So we have no real grasp or understanding of what they're doing with this money. They're kind of just saying, trust me, bro, in terms of their job creation model. But what they're doing is they're using that model to bring in data centers, and they're using the tax abatements that are in the billions of dollars in some areas, in some territories, at the expense of government funded services, because as we sacrifice those dollars for this development, they have to come from somewhere else, which means that we either have to cut spending in order to accommodate it, which 9 times out of 10 we are, in terms of healthcare spending, education spending, et cetera, which plays into a larger conversation on the property tax abolition down the road there. But they're doing this by saying that they're going to create jobs. And Jonathan, to your point, yeah, some of these centers employ tens of people,
Right.
if that annually. I mean, these are sometimes single digit employment creators, right?
Right.
Um, which is not justifying the massive expense, the increased electrical costs for residents all around the state, the water supply issues that we already touched on. And in terms of Ramaswamy and how it connects, in my opinion, Leslie Wexner himself has come out way at the beginning of this push and stated that his goal was to make Ohio the next Silicon Valley. He coined that term, the Silicon Heartland. That was his operation and his agenda. And what you see is Vivek Ramaswamy parroting that exact talking point on his campaign trail. And some of his campaign contributors are people directly tied into the Epstein and Wexner circles. These are people like the Dubin family, which are closely tied, to Epstein specifically in human trafficking. And he has stated on several occasions that he would return that money, but then nothing really ever came of it. There was no official confirmation that the money was returned or anything like that. So it's incredibly concerning to me that we have that kind of a candidate who's pushing the exact talking points of the guy who has been at the forefront of both human trafficking, in my opinion, in the state of Ohio and elsewhere, and now bringing in data centers to the state, which is ruining I'd say the livelihoods of Ohioans.
There's a great comment to that effect from Gardens of CH. In the end, private property owners do not benefit from data centers. Increased taxes and horrible outcomes for communities are the reality. I want to pause there for a moment and mention Skip has said a couple of things that are pretty important for the ongoing operations of Voice of Geauga. One is Skip's right. We're looking for more people like Jeff Skinner writing articles. To contact Voice of Geauga, the email is voiceofgeauga@gmail.com. Also, Skip was talking about somebody who contacted him from Ashtabula and had a hard time catching us over the air. Remember, you can stream the audio for this radio program anywhere in the world at wintradio.com or voiceofgeauga.com. Every weekday morning, Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 8 a.m., you can click that live stream button and stream the audio. My reason for interjecting all of that is because many hands make light work. The purpose and intention of Voice of Geauga is to bring us all together as a community. People like Jeff Skinner, Skip Claypool, myself, and many, many others who care about Geauga and are willing to fight for it. So there are a few things that I have planned in the hopper for the issue of data centers, but the first thing is getting the information out so people are well informed about their potential misuse, abuse, the tax and energy implications, and I'm going to sort of move us into the direction of energy consumption. Because what we're starting to see around the Akron area, and Stark County in particular, and Summit County, are increasing residential property taxes. And the understanding in that area is that that is due to the massive increases in energy use from data centers. Is that something you're following, Jeff? Do you have a comment on that?
Yeah, I mean it's absolutely right. The cost of energy is determined statewide. It's not just locally. Well, I should parse that out. There is obviously your individual usage kilowatt per hour, but the PUCO cost is determined statewide, and that's been increasing annually because of data center consumption. There's simply less. You can think of it like a supply and demand situation. They produce a set amount of electricity, and they have to buy it up at a specific rate, and the consumption of data centers has made that pool of available energy smaller, so the rates go higher. It's supply and demand at that point. So yes, it is increasing energy costs for everyone around the state, not just people who have data centers in their backyard. And someone living in Geauga County is paying the electrical bill of a data center that is in New Albany or in Lake County or in Cuyahoga. It is a problem for every Ohioan, I think, in the state. And that's why I think people need to not think about this just as a regional issue. They need to think about this as a statewide issue because of that very factor.
That's an excellent point. Not a lot of people are likely aware of that because especially in this era of joining those utilities co-ops and trying to negotiate better terms, we can't. That can't. That cannot happen if the energy, available energy, is reduced. And you're right. It's exactly right. It's supply and demand. And if the massive demand, and next I want to touch on the energy needs of these types of facilities. But if they're consuming huge amounts of energy, then there's very little to none that's left for we the people to consume. And I used as an example that one that's planned in Texas or being talked about. That one data center, if they build it in Texas, would use, I think they were saying, more than all homes in Texas combined currently. So we're talking about monumental, mind-boggling numbers here in the gigawatts. We're coming up on a break. Jeff, I don't want to start you on an answer and then I feel the need to interrupt you. But remember, you can join this conversation at Rumble, Facebook, and YouTube. We're on those 3 social media platforms, and feel free to call in 440-946-9468. And if there are things that you would like us to be covering on this show, or comments, or want to propose an article for submission, you can email voiceofgeauga@gmail.com. And today we are delving into the issue of data centers with Jeff Skinner. We're delighted to have him. That is a cue to stay tuned. Keep an eye on that mailbox because before too long, within the next few weeks, you'll receive your latest Voice of Geauga newspaper. You'll see some Jeff Skinner articles, I believe, in there, right, Skip? We're probably going to have at least one. Jeff seems to be a mainstay of Voice of Geauga.
Yes, and when we come back from the break, I want to make an announcement, by the way, that's significant.
A significant announcement.
Right after
There's
the
your
break,
cliffhanger, ladies and gentlemen. More on the other side of the break.
Mics are off. Mics are off.
All right. Well, they started the lead into that break a little earlier than normal. That run through all of the contact information. But Jeff, I was at that point. I was like 1:20 seconds. I'm not going to ask you a really difficult question about energy use and then give you 1 minute to answer. That's just not. It wouldn't be fair to you.
No, it's fine. And actually, I got your message, but midway through the first break, my computer sent me a notification saying it was going to restart, and I was like, okay, first off, why? But hopefully it's just one of those standard Windows 11.
That's a Wexner thing. It's a Wexner thing.
Yeah, I didn't want to say it, but I'm like, are they really?
Yeah, I'm telling you,
there already, huh?
He's got a big reach. He's pretty old. I'm surprised he's not dead yet. I was just looking at his history. He's got to be 90 or something. He's born in 37.
Look, I mean, my concern with all that is, he's old, but like, we can't forget Congress deposed him in his house. I don't know who gets that privilege. Like, everybody else has to go down to DC. This guy, gets to have it in the comfort of his living room. And he doesn't really say anything. His lawyer's sitting there the whole time, like, hey, if you say anything more than a 5-word answer, I'm going to effing kill you. Like, because he kept talking. He has that mobsters refer to as diarrhea of the mouth,
By the way, I want to point out, Jonathan, we've not been, and I'm probably jinxing us, but we haven't been disconnected at all today. The internet is stable.
Don't jinx us. Wait until after the show to say that.
And we're getting a lot of good comments.
10 seconds.
Welcome back to Voice of Geauga with Skip Claypool, myself, Jonathan Broadbent, and returning guest Jeff Skinner. We're talking about data centers today and where the origins, why they seem to be popping up like weeds, terrible, nefarious weeds in my book, all over Ohio. We've got some great comments. Well, actually, Jeff, I want to flip back to you with the question, and I'm going to push pause on some of the comments. Before we went to the break, I was starting to ask the use of the question about energy consumption and use, and we didn't have time to give you the mic for answer before the break.
Save some time before the end of the program for that significant announcement, too. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I mean, energy consumption. I think we talked about it a little bit in terms of the impact to the residents. But yeah, some of these data centers going in. There's one plan for Ohio coming in now that I think has stated that it would use somewhere between a third and potentially even half of the state's energy usage.
Oh
So
my gosh.
it's going to have significant impact, when these things come in, and I the average Ohioan, especially the Geauga County resident, like we were saying, I think that they need to think about this as okay. It's not just don't think about it just okay. Lake County's up north. That's not my area. I don't need to worry about it. You do. You're paying for it. You're paying for it right now. And as this progresses, as more construction happens, as more of these dot in around the state, your energy bill will increase. That is just the nature of supply and demand. I have not seen through either our current government administration down in Columbus or any incumbents coming in, save for potentially one that has strong plans for how to, rein in this operation or develop new energy technologies and infrastructure to handle it. So my big concern with it is everyone has smart meters on their homes right now. And what I foresee, and this is just Jeff, theory here, but we are moving expeditiously towards a world in which your energy usage can and could be throttled through the use of those smart meters and smart meter technology, working with your smart thermostat, such that more energy can be allocated to things that are of higher priority, i.e., what they might consider emergency infrastructure. If that's data center management, so that it can manage the flock camera surveillance systems and next gen 911 technology that is all going to be AI based in the state, all of that stuff will become a conversation, a political conversation, in my opinion, for emergency management of energy usage. So we could see brownouts, we could see throttling of energy usage to power these things. And I think people need to keep that in the back of their mind and do your own research, read about it, make your own conclusions. But that is my personal theory on where a lot of this goes.
Let me interject something about this Jobs Ohio. That's a public private partnership. And as Skip said, I don't find anything good about those types of structures.
They're not
I'm
good
with
at all.
Skip on that. These are a
Yeah.
terrible idea. But in particular, Jobs Ohio started collecting billions of dollars in liquor taxes a long time ago under the auspices of creating jobs in Ohio, hence the name Jobs Ohio. I looked recently, and Ohio ranked 37th in the nation for job creation. We are lagging behind virtually everywhere, almost everywhere else in the nation. So I started looking into Jobs Ohio and wondering why is it that we're spending so much money on not attracting jobs in Ohio? And it was around that time when our legislature got together, and a lot of people were questioning Jobs Ohio. Their contract that allows them to collect those taxes wasn't due, and Jeff, you may remember the dates of these, but it's a clear indication of some nefarious bad actors pulling strings behind the scenes. But the state contract with Jobs Ohio wasn't due to expire until something like 2029. But then mid last year, 2025, the legislature got together and voted for a contract extension for another uh, X number of years. And I think now we are contractually obligated with Jobs Ohio through 2035, I think it is. That to me is an indication that some bad people saw we, the public, we, the people, sniffing around asking questions about Jobs Ohio and tried to cover themselves. Do you know anything about that?
Well, that's what I know is what you just said, and it is exactly right. Yes, they. renewed the contract far earlier than they were supposed to. And again, conjecture, my opinion. I think that was intentional. I think that that plays into a lot of the plans of bringing data centers in because that's how Jobs Ohio has been operating right now. But that's where I kind of see it going, and it is unfortunate that we are stuck with that organization at this time. Um, yeah, that's what I can say about it.
Well, I'm going to make two quick reads, and then I know Skip has an announcement. Gardens of CH says Voice of Geauga is an outstanding truth source. Well done, guys. So that is a very nice recognition of the work that we do here at Voice of Geauga. There's also a question: where can I sign petitions against data centers? Are either of you aware of a petition that's been started?
Yes, there is a petition going around. I believe it might be a statewide moratorium, similar to what they've been doing in Maine. And it is going around. Check social media, check your community groups. If you're in Lake County, check some of the local areas around Perry. I know that those signatures are circulated are positioned out in there. I have not seen any locations for Geauga just yet, but I imagine once they get established, they're going to be posting on community Facebook pages across the county.
Yeah, I'm just going to quickly interject. I have some plans on that front as well, some things that I'm personally working on. So if you follow me on social media, I'll be talking about this subject as well. Also, I am one of the hosts of Ohio Political News with Brian Massey and Joe Miller. We speak on this subject regularly. Over to you, Skip. I know you have an announcement.
All right, so here's a very significant announcement. It kind of relates in a loose way to this data center topic. Next Thursday, Brian Massey, the only guy in the state of Ohio that knows where the petitions exist, what the status is on the petitions for the abolish property tax. He's got a press release, a press event planned for next Thursday. And I've been invited to participate in it. Very limited number of people. So, Voice of Geauga will be at this announcement where Brian Massey will be making a significant update and an announcement on the property tax situation in the state of Ohio. And we will be publishing in our Voice of Geauga newspaper some information on that. Brian's promised me an article. So if you're listening, Brian, I'm going to hold you to that. It won't
That's an
contain
exclusive,
it,
right?
it won't yes, it won't contain the announcement for next Thursday, but because he's keeping that close to his vest, nobody knows. He's amazingly kept that to him. But think about where this whole property tax thing started is because we the citizens got just absolutely fed up with an incompetent state legislature. And not only state legislature, but local governments. We have temporary employees, people who are elected for a 4-year term or a 6-year term, who are in there making decisions that we have to live with for a long, long time. And it is time for us to wake up and realize, like with these data centers, we're actually in power if we decide we want to take that power, use that power. And that is, we can call our elected officials and ensure that they understand from us loudly and clearly where we stand on issues. And if enough of us do that, then we can get their attention and hopefully change the direction on things. So, outside of the petition that we can sign, because everybody thinks petitions are a magic bullet, they're not. Call your state legislator. Call Sarah Fowler. Call Sandy O'Brien. Call Steve Demetrio. Call Dave Joyce. He may or may not even take your call, but call various elected
Yeah.
officials and let them know loudly and clearly where you stand. You have a right to do that. This is a government of the people, by the people, for the people. And
Call,
so
post, and even tag them on social media.
that's right.
They believe me, they recognize those things. A few closing comments. Remember, go to Voice of Geauga on Facebook and find the posts on the fake slate cards that are being mailed into Geauga. Share the information. There are fake cards being mailed in from outside of Geauga County targeting Republicans, and they're smear tactics, lies, and they're fake endorsements that have nothing to do with the Geauga Republican Party. Also, there's a great post there from the County Board of Elections. There's a call out to get more people volunteering for the upcoming elections and need more poll workers. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. I hope you have a great day.